The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. There is a sort of prototype of what a border wall could be like being built down in the San Diego borderlands. There are these different style fences. 4 are solid concrete, 4 are made of steel and concrete, and one is topped with very, very damaging, dangerous-looking spikes. They're all close to 30 feet tall, and Customs and Border Protection is paying $20 million to 6 construction companies to build these. And the idea is to basically show people what these could be like. And we don't know whether these are ever going to be built. Of course, the idea that Donald Trump is going to get Mexico to pay for the wall at this point seems like a totally foregone conclusion that it will not be happening. And I actually have I know some people, Pat, who work in Border Patrol, and there's this really weird thing where a lot of them are supportive of the Trump immigration policies. I do wonder whether they realize that if the wall was built and it was as successful as Trump claims it would be, wouldn't it endanger their jobs because you wouldn't need nearly as many Customs and Border Patrol people if the wall works that well? I don't know if you've thought about that at all.
No, I haven't thought about that. I mean, I guess it would help them achieve their objective, which is, to reduce the amount of border crossings. But I guess ultimately, if it was to work, that would endanger their jobs. I think, most Trump voters in particular just focus on reducing border crossings at all costs and don't think about the jobs there.
No doubt about it. And this is being used for PR. The president has been tweeting border wall prototypes underway. I actually, I don't have a problem per se with putting a wall on your border. Hey, it's your border. As long as it's on your side of the border, of course, you're completely free to put up whatever it is that you want. My problem is with the way that it's become politicized, what it would cost, and the fact that it wouldn't really actually be that effective. We've looked into it extensively. And when you look at overstayed visas, people coming in from other countries, regardless of whether they're originally trying to come to the U.S. from Latin America or not, I just don't think it's going to be that effective. And I think it's a distraction. It's a political ploy. It's something, when you can take a picture of what you're doing politically, it's much more enticing to politicians changing enforcement of some immigration laws or working to find people who have overstayed their visas or whatever you think the merits are of doing that. That's more difficult to take a picture of. You're already seeing the pictures of these wall prototypes. I think that's a big part of it, Pat, that you can create a visual representation of the work that you're doing, and politicians love it.
Right, I'm against the building of the wall mainly for reasons that you laid out, although I don't know if cost to me is one of them, because I think the estimated cost would be anywhere from $20 billion to $40 billion. And while that does sound like a significant amount of money, if you think about the overall expenditures of the government, it really doesn't add up to too much. So, I think, targeting arguments about visa overstays, how this just would be ineffectual, seem a lot more effective from the Democratic approach.
I don't disagree with you that 20 to 40 billion is not a lot for the federal government, but at the same time, I like to think about it a different way, which is this is a totally arbitrary project to do. What other things could be done with 20 to 40 billion dollars? Sure. And even though it might not be a lot, you can still do good stuff with it. So I think that let me put it a different way. If we're arguing like Mitt Romney did, we've got to cut funding to, public broadcasting, that is a significant benefit, and it's a total drop in the bucket. And if the argument being made is that we can't afford it, that's when I think it's useful to say it's a drop in the bucket for the government. Here, though, we're talking about new spending that arguably wouldn't even be that beneficial. So I actually think it's okay to say, hey, here's something else you could do. You could fund this education program, or you could do something to try to, I don't know, even though curbing climate change is going to be much more than a $20 to $40 billion project. I don't know. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I still think that it's money that we should not be spending.
I guess it's a decent argument. I just don't know if I would lead with it, especially because I think right-wingers would compare the cost of the wall to some of our other government expenditures and point out to people that it really wouldn't be that much overall. So maybe it's just better to lead with, the arguments about how effective or ineffective building a wall would be. I'm just waiting to see the prototypes of the big, beautiful door that's going to go in the middle of this wall.
Yeah, these pictures of the prototype walls did not include prototypes of those beautiful doors that people will then come back in through. Hey, here is a crazy story. A passenger has filed a lawsuit there's a Canadian budget airline called Sunwing. And they supposedly were going to be serving him champagne, but they instead served him sparkling wine. He believed that he was getting complimentary champagne service, and it turns out that it was cheap sparkling wine in a plastic cup. So he is filing a lawsuit. Now, the airline is saying that the lawsuit is frivolous and without merit, and that the term champagne service does not literally mean champagne. It just means this is the level of service, and if we want to serve sparkling wine, we'll serve sparkling wine. I cannot believe that this is actually going forward, and the lawyer for this individual says that the problem is misleading advertising, not the actual quality of the wine. What are the damages, though? That's what I don't get here, Pat. I mean, I don't know exactly how Canadian lawsuits work, but you would have to demonstrate that this was either typically the way these lawsuits work are you either have to demonstrate that there were damages, and I don't know how the passenger was damaged by having sparkling wine versus actual champagne, or you would have to show that the company was deliberately and maliciously misleading, I guess for profit, by marketing champagne service rather than the actual sparkling wine. I just don't see how in a US court this would ever fly.
I mean, I think it sounds like a completely frivolous lawsuit, absolutely. But I guess his case would be that he was marketed something, sold something in particular, and the company that sold it to him didn't deliver on their end and marketed falsely. I guess that would be the claim. It's different because it's not like this is a brand. It's not like he was sold Coke and actually ended up getting Pepsi. So I don't know how that would play in by the law. I mean, I know the FDA, and I'm sure internationally they have different regulations on what the definitions of products has to be, but I'm not sure how this would work out, and absolutely seems frivolous.
I think your point is the exact one, which is they're marketing a level of service, right? The champagne per se is not really relevant to the flight. What's relevant to the flight is how likely are you to be on time? Is it a safe airline? Is it a first class or premium economy or economy cabin? And what level of service is there? And the idea of champagne service is part of that general class of service. The specifics of what drink is served are more like, hey, in economy, you get a free soda. And whether it's Coke or Pepsi doesn't really make a difference. I completely agree with you. Would you ever file a lawsuit over something like this?
No, it sounds completely frivolous, very petty to do, I think. A waste of resources, public resources that are better used somewhere else, I think. No, I would never do anything like this. And it seems like people who drink champagne can often be very snobby about it. I mean, it has to come from grapes within, the vineyards of Champagne, France, and it has to be distilled twice. Why do you have to be so snobby about such a thing? It's just alcohol.
Isn't it true, though, Pat, that once you had requested the vegan meal and you were served the Asian vegetarian meal, which happened to be vegan, but it was not a particular vegan meal, and
that
you
is true,
flipped out
yes.
and yeah, I remember that you tossed it at the flight attendant, and it was a big scene.
Yeah, kicked
Okay.
off that plane.
I don't know if you've been following some of Amazon's latest work, but they are now building more and more of these major, massive, multi-billion-dollar headquarters in different cities. And I think that this actually connects a lot with their strategy around buying Whole Foods and sort of the real estate footprint and stranglehold in many cases that real estate ownership is going to give them in so many different businesses and industries around the country. And there are now studies being done as to what the negative impacts could be of these major Whole Foods warehouses. And sort of some of the obvious ones are traffic jams, number one, and the idea that people are going to be moving realistically for some of these jobs, and people who don't move are going to be commuting in, and that you could see significant pressure on the transportation infrastructure, I guess we would call it, as a result of thousands of workers that are going to be commuting to some of these warehouses. The other issue is that you are going to see potentially some pressure on the labor force. And it can be hard to predict when you have one employer that comes in and is going to be absorbing a significant number of jobs. You see it sometimes with really, really big casinos, although in most of the US, casinos are in relatively rural areas other than Las Vegas. And there are potentially going to be some significant significant issues for communities in terms of the impact of Amazon coming in and hiring all of these people, which of course we want jobs and we want technology and we want convenience, but how is this need for jobs at a particular warehouse going to impact the broader labor infrastructure of the city? So with all of these things, Pat, there are always unintended consequences. Housing, arguably right now, housing prices in many major metropolitan areas are in a pretty significant bubble. What's going to happen if all of these people come in and all are looking for housing all of a sudden? Is that going to further the housing price bubble? All really important issues that are being considered by these communities that are waiting for the completion of these Amazon warehouses.
Yeah, I think housing should be at your top of list of concerns, maybe traffic as well. But then you have Amazon claiming that they're going to add 50,000 jobs to the community, that they're going to have an average salary of those jobs at about $100,000 each, and that they're going to invest $5 billion into infrastructure. So that's significant as well, and you can see why so many cities are putting their bids forth. But then you have cities like San Antonio who are just not willing to compete because many of these cities are offering incredible tax breaks, like, removing property taxes and sales taxes, not requiring those of Amazon. So which city is going to end up getting the bid? Probably one that's very, very open to creating these tax incentives for this company. I mean, I don't think, even though Boston's vying for it, I don't think we're going to end up getting it.
Yeah, Boston, I think, is getting something else, which is like a distribution center or something like that. And now that's why in Boston we can get like the 1 and 2 hour delivery. But that's significantly smaller than these major warehouse proposals. And in Amazon's defense, they claim that in Seattle, for example, they had an economic multiplier of 1.4 relative to their investment, meaning that for every dollar Amazon invested in their presence in Seattle, they added $1.40 to the local economy through the economic multiplier of wages paid and contractors hired and services that they are hiring for, et cetera. I've made no secret that I am really mixed on Amazon. Obviously, we participate in the Amazon affiliate program, and I think that the innovation that we've seen from Amazon is amazing and something that I'm fascinated to see the progress of over the next 5, 10, and 15 years. But at the same time, listen, I've read all the articles. I know about how Amazon treats their warehouse workers. I know about the impact that Amazon has on local bookstores. So I don't know how I would sort of characterize my total for and against with Amazon, Pat, but I think it's okay to recognize both the innovative nature and concerning business practices of a corporation.
Sure, and some cities are going to be more open to it than others. I think the top contenders are maybe Philadelphia. I even saw Rochester, New York. And it's interesting to see like the different cities competing with each other too. You have these different ad campaigns that cities are releasing, trying to lure Amazon into coming to their city. And I also saw Londonderry, New Hampshire is beefing with Boston, Massachusetts over this bid, claiming that Boston's streets are too congested and our public subways aren't efficient enough, and that's why they have to go to some random town in New Hampshire instead of a city like Boston. Although, yeah, I guess Amazon said they wanted a city with close access to an airport and more than 1 million people, which, Boston has the airport, but not that many people.
Yeah, I mean, Boston has 600-something thousand people, but the metro area is like 3.5 million. But I don't disagree with that. Boston's public transit system has huge holes that are effectively unreachable or not conveniently reachable via via public transportation, and the streets are crowded. And even just a couple FedEx trucks doing deliveries in some of the older parts of towns, it will block up traffic in a crazy way. I mean, I get why Boston would want to make a counter argument, but I think those are pretty good arguments for not doing this in Boston.
I guess that's what happens when you design a city before the advent of the automobile.
Yeah, no doubt about it. When it's all horse carriages and then you're paving over dirt roads that used to be just for horses. Okay, that's it for the bonus show today. Thank you for joining me today from Las Vegas, Nevada. I will also be here tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.